On my 21st birthday, my grandfather, Raymond Carver, a man everyone in town knew as a billionaire, leaned across the table and asked me a question that stopped everything. He looked right at me and said, "Is the apartment comfortable?" I blinked, thinking I misheard him, but he repeated it slowly as if testing me. I shook my head and answered, "What apartment?" The room went so still I could hear my own heartbeat. My parents, Margot and Daniel, froze in place, their smiles breaking into nervous stares. My grandfather's grin vanished, replaced with a cold expression that felt sharper than a knife. He turned his gaze to them and asked in a voice heavy with suspicion, "Then where did the money go?" I sat there confused, my birthday cake untouched, wondering what he meant. An apartment? Money? None of this made sense to me, but the way my parents shifted uncomfortably told me this wasn't some misunderstanding. It was like a hidden door had just been cracked open, and behind it was something I was never meant to see. My father cleared his throat, my mother tried to laugh it off, but my grandfather's stare cut right through them. My stomach twisted as I realized there were secrets in this family that I had been kept out of all my life. For years I believed we lived modestly because my parents wanted a simple life. They always said money was tight, that we had to sacrifice, that tuition and bills were stretching them thin. I accepted it because I trusted them. But now, hearing my grandfather speak of an apartment I never knew about, it felt like the floor under me had shifted. Something was wrong, and I could sense it wasn't small. My parents weren't just hiding something, they were hiding something from me. In that moment I felt a strange mix of anger and fear. My grandfather's question had opened a wound I didn't know existed. I didn't yet know what money he was talking about, but I could see in my parents' eyes that they did. And whatever it was, it had been meant for me. Growing up, I always thought of my family as ordinary. My parents, Margot and Daniel, made sure I understood the value of money. We lived in a modest house with peeling paint on the porch, an old car that needed repairs more often than not, and a constant reminder that we had to watch every dollar. When I asked for new shoes, I was told to wait until next month. When I wanted to join a sports team, the answer was that the fees were too high. I believed them because I trusted them, and I thought they were simply doing their best. What confused me even then was the shadow of my grandfather, Raymond Carver. Everyone in town knew he was rich beyond imagination. People whispered about his empire, his businesses, and the houses he owned. At school, friends asked if I was spoiled, if I got gifts most kids couldn't dream of. I laughed it off because, in truth, my life was nothing like they pictured. Our dinners were cheap, our vacations were short trips to nearby towns, and every birthday came with the same words, "We can't afford much this year." I never questioned it, but there were small moments that stuck with me. Nights when I woke up thirsty and heard my parents downstairs, arguing in low voices. Words like inheritance and trust floated through the air, always followed by a tense silence when I entered the room. They would smile too quickly, tell me it was nothing, and change the subject. I wanted to believe them, but a part of me sensed something wasn't right. As I grew older, these whispers turned into patterns. Letters from the bank would arrive, and my parents would rush to hide them. I noticed my father's anger when my grandfather's name came up in conversation. My mother's nervous glances whenever I asked simple questions about our family's money. I pushed those thoughts aside because I didn't want to doubt the two people I loved most. Still, in quiet moments I wondered, how could my grandfather, one of the wealthiest men in the state, let us live like this? Why didn't he step in? Why did it feel like there was an invisible wall between him and me? I didn't know it then, but that wall had been built by my parents, brick by brick, with lies and secrets stacked so high I couldn't see the truth. It would take years before I finally understood just how much they had been hiding from me. When my grandfather first mentioned the apartment, I thought he was joking. He spoke in his steady voice, saying he had given me a place in downtown Chicago for my 18th birthday. For a moment, I just stared at him, waiting for a laugh or a smirk, something that would tell me he was teasing me. But his face didn't change. He was serious. My heart sank because I knew nothing about any apartment. I had never seen it, never heard of it, and certainly never lived in it. I asked him to explain, and he looked confused, as if I was the one making a mistake. He reminded me of the day he had signed the deed, the letter he had sent, and the calls he had made to my parents to make sure everything was taken care of. He said it was meant to give me a start in life, a place to live while I went through school, a safety net that would always belong to me. Hearing those words felt like being hit with a weight I couldn't carry. If all of that was true, where was it now? I turned to my parents, searching for answers, but their faces told me everything before they even spoke. My father forced a laugh, waving his hand like it was nothing, calling it a misunderstanding. My mother nodded quickly, agreeing with him, saying there must have been some mix-up, some mistake in communication. They changed the subject so fast it made my head spin. They talked about the cake, about plans for the weekend, about anything except the apartment. But I couldn't let it go. The air in the room felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the thought that something precious had been taken from me without my knowledge. My grandfather's eyes lingered on my parents, sharp and unblinking, as though he already knew the truth but wanted to hear it from them. I could feel my chest tightening, anger and confusion mixing together. For the first time in my life, I wondered if my parents were really being honest with me or if everything they had told me had been part of a much bigger lie. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the moment over and over. I thought about the apartment I never saw, the gift I never received, and the quick lies my parents told to cover it up. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal easily. And mine had just begun to crack. My grandfather's questions didn't stop with the apartment. His voice grew sharper as he looked straight at my parents and asked about the trust. At first I didn't understand what he meant, but then he explained that on my 18th birthday he had started sending money every single year. It was supposed to cover my tuition, my rent, and anything else I needed while I built my life. He said it was a promise he made the day I was born, that no matter what happened I would always be taken care of. He spoke of it like it was obvious, like of course I knew about it. But I didn't. I had never seen a single dollar. I sat frozen, my mind racing back through the years. Every time I needed books for school, every time I asked about tuition, every time my parents shook their heads and sighed about how hard things were, it all came flooding back. They told me they were struggling, that they had to take out loans, that sacrifices had to be made. I believed them. I carried guilt on my shoulders, thinking I was a burden, thinking I was draining them when I asked for even the smallest help. And now here I was, learning that money had always been there, just never in my hands. I asked my father directly where the money went and he said it was complicated. My mother tried to smooth things over, saying it was used for family needs. But family needs didn't explain the worn-out sneakers I wore for years, or the way they scolded me for asking to join school trips we supposedly couldn't afford. Their words rang hollow and every sentence made me feel smaller, like I had been living in a carefully built illusion. My grandfather's face hardened. He repeated that the trust was meant for me alone, not for anyone else. His words cut through the room like a blade, and I felt both shame and fury rise in me. Shame because I had been blind for so long, and fury because the two people I trusted most had been lying to me every single day. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how many moments in my life had been shaped by their lies. I thought about the years of stress, the nights I felt guilty for costing too much, the times I turned down opportunities because I thought we couldn't afford them. All of it was a lie. And once I realized that, something inside me broke. My trust in my parents wasn't just cracked anymore. It was shattered. My grandfather's patience finally snapped. His voice, usually calm and steady, rose with anger as he demanded to know where the money had gone. The room fell silent except for the sound of my father's shallow breathing and my mother's nervous tapping on the table. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then my father muttered that they had only borrowed it, that it was never meant to be permanent. He tried to make it sound reasonable, as if taking my entire future away was just a small misunderstanding. My mother quickly added that it was for business opportunities, investments that were supposed to grow and benefit all of us. At first I wanted to believe them, but my grandfather's cold glare told me the truth before his words did. He said he had seen the way they lived, the trips they took, the expensive cars, the fine clothes. He listed each indulgence one by one, and with every word my chest tightened more. These weren't business investments. They were excuses. They had spent money meant for me on things that made them look successful, while I lived thinking we were barely scraping by. I felt my face grow hot with anger. Every memory of my parents sighing about bills, every lecture about sacrifice, every guilt trip about how hard they worked. It all twisted into lies. They weren't struggling, they were stealing. They were trading my education and my security for vacations and dinners I never saw. I thought about the years I blamed myself for costing too much, the times I felt guilty for asking for help. All that time the money was there. They just chose themselves over me. When my father tried to defend himself, I cut him off. I couldn't listen anymore. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Looking at them, I didn't see my parents anymore. I saw thieves dressed as caregivers, liars pretending to sacrifice, People who had built their comfort on the foundation of my stolen future. The bond one once held on to so tightly had snapped in that moment. My grandfather's voice broke the silence, steady but cold. He told them their greed had destroyed the trust of their own son. His words echoed the truth already forming in my heart. That night I stopped being their child. I became the victim of their betrayal, and nothing could make me see them as anything else again. After the storm at the dinner table, I couldn't let the matter rest. Later that night I asked my parents to sit down with me away from my grandfather. I wanted answers directly from them without excuses or distractions. My voice shook as I asked the question that had been burning inside me since the truth started unraveling. Why didn't they ever tell me? Why didn't they trust me with the truth about the money, about the apartment, about everything? My father leaned back with a sigh, his face heavy with frustration, and told me they had done it for me. He said I wouldn't have understood at the time, that I would have wasted the money, that I would have made mistakes. My mother quickly joined him, nodding, saying that one day I would thank them. They painted themselves as protectors, not thieves, and it made my blood boil. It was as if they were rewriting the story right in front of me, trying to make me believe that their greed was actually sacrifice. I told them I wasn't a child anymore, that I had lived years believing we were poor, years full of guilt for being a financial burden. I reminded them of the times I turned down opportunities, the nights I studied by a dim lamp because they said we couldn't afford electricity bills on time, the days I wore clothes that didn't fit because there wasn't enough money for new ones. My voice cracked when I asked how they could let me live like that while knowing the truth. Instead of remorse, they grew defensive. My father said I was ungrateful. My mother told me I had no idea how hard life was, that they carried a weight I couldn't understand. Their words felt like poison, twisting reality, making me doubt my own anger. But deep inside I knew better. I knew what they had done and no excuse could change it. In that moment something inside me shifted. The bond that tied me to them as their son loosened until it finally broke. They weren't the parents I thought I had. They were people who chose themselves over me, who stole not only money but trust, safety, and love. I realized I couldn't keep living in their shadow. I had to step away, to distance myself from their lies and take control of my own future. That night I decided I would never let them control me again. After the fight, my grandfather asked me to follow him outside. His voice was calm, but I could feel the anger hidden beneath it. We stood in the cool night air, and for a moment he just looked at me as if he was searching for something in my face. Then he said words that I will never forget. He told me that he had wanted to see who I really was when faced with betrayal, and now he knew. He said that betrayal breaks some people, but for others, it reveals their strength. I didn't know what to say. My chest was still heavy with anger and my mind was full of questions, but hearing him speak made me feel both seen and tested. He explained that he had always known money could twist people, that greed could eat away at family. That was why he set up the apartment and the trust, to give me a fair chance at life without making me dependent on anyone else. He admitted that he had suspected my parents might fail me, but he needed to see how I would react when the truth came out. He placed his hand on my shoulder and said he believed I was different. He said I had something my parents lacked, discipline and heart. But he warned me that trust was not enough to build a life. He wanted me to prove myself. He told me he could open doors, give me opportunities, but I would have to walk through them on my own. Nothing would be handed to me unless I earned it. I felt a fire start inside me. The pain from my parents' betrayal turned into something sharper, something I could use. I told him I would do whatever it took to stand on my own, to prove I wasn't like them. He nodded, almost as if he had been waiting for me to say that. That night I understood my life had changed forever. My parents had shown me the cost of greed, but my grandfather was showing me the value of strength. I was no longer just a son caught in the middle of lies. I was someone with a chance to build a life on my own terms, and I wasn't going to waste it. My grandfather kept his word. He gave me small tasks in his company, nothing too big at first, but enough to test me. I worked in the office late, learning how things ran, listening more than I spoke, and pushing myself harder than I ever had before. For the first time, I felt like I was building something that belonged to me, not something filtered through my parents' hands. Every success, no matter how small, made me feel stronger. My grandfather noticed, and though he didn't say much, I could see his pride in the way he looked at me. I discovered quickly that work was nothing like school. It wasn't about memorizing facts or passing exams. It was about discipline, showing up even when I was tired, making decisions that mattered, and owning the results. I carried myself differently because I knew everything I did reflected back on me. People in the company began to respect me not because of my grandfather's name, but because I earned it. That mattered more than anything. While I was finding my place, my parents grew colder. The more I stepped into independence, the more they seemed to lose control. They had lived for years knowing the money was theirs to use, and now that grip was gone. At dinners, the tension was thick. My father made sharp remarks about how I thought I was better than them. My mother sighed loudly, shaking her head whenever my grandfather praised me. What used to be family meals turned into quiet battles where every word carried hidden anger. I noticed their resentment, but I no longer let it crush me. In the past, their approval had meant everything, but after seeing the lies they built, their disappointment meant nothing. Each cold look from them reminded me that I was free from their control. Their bitterness was proof that I was finally becoming my own man, something they had never wanted for me. This was the turning point. I stopped seeing myself as their child trapped in their choices and started seeing myself as someone who could stand on his own. Their anger no longer held me down. My focus was on the future I was creating, a future built on truth, hard work, and strength. My grandfather was a man who never wasted words, but when it came to betrayal, he believed the truth had to be exposed. He called a family gathering and invited several business associates, people who had known my parents for years and respected them. When everyone was seated, he stood at the head of the room and laid out the truth piece by piece. He explained how he had set up the trust for me, how the apartment had been meant for me, and how the money was stolen under the disguise of business ventures. His voice was steady, but each sentence struck like a hammer. My parents tried to interrupt, but no one believed them anymore. My grandfather had documents, records, and proof. He listed the vacations, the purchases, the failed investments that had swallowed money meant for me. Faces around the room shifted from shock to disappointment. The respect my parents once enjoyed began to crumble right before my eyes. By the end of it, Margot and Daniel weren't seen as victims of hard times. They were seen as liars who had stolen from their own child. The fallout was immediate. People who once welcomed them into their homes turned away. Old friends stopped calling. In business circles, their names became warnings, not invitations. Watching it happen, I felt no joy, but I didn't feel pity either. What they had done couldn't be erased with apologies or excuses. Their downfall was the weight of their own choices finally crashing down. As my role in my grandfather's company grew, I learned they were desperate for help. They came to me quietly, first with gentle words, then with pleading voices. They asked for money, for forgiveness, for a second chance. Every part of me wanted to shout at them for the years they had stolen, but I didn't raise my voice. I simply said no. I wasn't going to bail them out. It was strange standing there looking at the two people who once controlled every part of my life. They had stolen my future to build their comfort, and now that comfort was gone. The betrayal had come full circle, and I was no longer powerless. The boy they had deceived had become the man who denied them mercy. When the dust finally settled, my grandfather handed me the documents that changed everything. The trust was placed fully in my control. The apartment in downtown Chicago, the one I never even knew existed, was officially mine. He told me he should have done this years earlier, but he was glad I had proven myself worthy of it now. Holding those papers in my hands, I felt a weight lift off me. For the first time, my future belonged only to me. For my parents, there was nothing left. The money they had stolen was gone, wasted on things that didn't last. Their names were ruined in family circles and business communities alike. They were cut off financially, forced to live with the consequences of the choices they had made. They looked at me with hollow eyes, hoping I might give in, but I didn't. I wasn't cruel, I didn't scream or throw their betrayal in their faces, but I stayed cold and distant. The boy who once begged for their approval no longer existed. That distance was my revenge. Not money, not anger, not even words could match the silence I gave them. They had raised me in lies, stolen from me, and tried to convince me it was for my own good. Now they had to live without me, without my trust, without my forgiveness. And that was a punishment no amount of money could fix. I turned my focus to building a life that honored the lessons my grandfather had given me. He had shown me what betrayal looks like, but he also showed me what strength could do when faced with it. I thanked him for opening my eyes, but deep down I mourned the parents I thought I had. The people I loved never really existed. They had been replaced by greed long ago. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who should love you the most. And when that happens, the best revenge is living without them. If my story touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with the people you care about.